In 1985, an episode of a TV show aired which might honestly be the weirdest and most awful thing anybody has ever made. A singular 30 minutes of 1980s television that is so bafflingly strange in its story and the message it tries to get across that I just simply had to break it down for you. And the craziest thing is, it was created by the same people who made Jaws and Star Wars. What if I told you that there was an anthology science fiction TV show created by Steven Spielberg with episodes directed by him, Martin Scorsese, Joe Dante, Clint Eastwood, Brad Bird, Irvin Kershner, Robert Zemeckis, Danny DeVito, and Burt Reynolds, and music composed by John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, Alan Silvestri, and Danny Elfman, featuring actors like Harvey Keitel, Dom DeLuise, Christopher Lloyd, and John Lithgow. Almost nobody ever talks about 1985's Amazing Stories, which is exactly all those things I just said. Amazing Stories was based on Spielberg's favorite science fiction magazine of the same name from his youth and was greenlit as a result of the massive success of his blockbuster alien adventure film E.T. in 1982. Now the hottest director working, NBC offered Spielberg a 2-year contract to make any kind of TV show he wanted with a budget of $1 million per episode. And he chose to make an anthology TV show that assembled a veritable who's who of filmmaking royalty to craft stories of, quote, ordinary people encountering something extraordinary, as he put it. It ran for 2 seasons and then just kind of disappeared into the ether. The only reason I even know about it is because it briefly got dumped on Netflix back in 2015, long before the streaming platform became the industry-devouring harbinger of algorithmically generated slop it is today. In a simpler time when it was just a dumping ground for a bunch of random old bullshit, plus Stranger Things. So, is the show any good? I mean, it's alright. You'd think with a pedigree like that it'd be the greatest show of all time, but it honestly kind of collapses under its own weight. The show doesn't have the same conceptual glue to hold it together as other more effective anthology shows. Classics like Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt, The Outer Limits, Black Mirror, or Friday the 13th all benefit from a strong thematic consistency that guarantees that you always know what you're getting into with each episode. By comparison, a collection of amazing stories is such a loosely defined thematic foundation that you wind up with a TV show that has one episode about an evil sentient toupee and another that is an animated story about a cartoon dog. I am not kidding about the evil toupee episode. The most significant aspect of Amazing Stories, other than the talent behind and in front of the camera, is the fact that several famous films seem to have completely stolen their entire plot from this show. There are episodes of Amazing Stories with uncanny, almost beat-for-beat similarity to The Green Mile, Beetlejuice, The Last Action Hero, and The Truman Show. But we're not here to talk about those. We're talking about Season 1, Episode 16 of Amazing Stories, titled Gather Ye Acorns. We open on a young boy in 1932 named Jonathan Quick, listening to the radio and reading a comic. His mom storms into the room, scolding him about being lazy and orders him to get up and do something productive before his father gets home.
You are the laziest child in 10 counties, I swear it.
Eventually, she sends him outside to read a medical book his father bought for him. Apparently, at the age of 7, his parents are grooming him to go to medical school and become a doctor. It seems a bit early to start cutting your teeth on Grey's Anatomy, but what do I know? I read comic books and watched TV as a 7-year-old, and I'm currently not a doctor. Maybe if my parents had forced diagrams of corpses with blunt force trauma down my throat, I'd be a millionaire right now instead of analyzing episodes of TV shows from the 80s for clout. But little Johnny Quick's light Sunday afternoon reading is interrupted by some kind of magical anti-capitalist dwarf who calls himself Mother Nature's only son, and then proceeds to go on a long rant about how boring and stupid money is and how the world needs fewer doctors and more dreamers.
There's doctors aplenty in this world. What we could truly do with is a few more dreamers.
Which can't be true, right? Maybe we need fewer stockbrokers, but like, doctors? I think we need a lot of those. So, the son of Mother Nature tells Jonathan that if he listens to his advice, he'll one day be rich beyond his wildest dreams. And then he tells him exactly what he needs to do to achieve this vast wealth. And it's not really what you'd think it would be.
First of all, You'll need a car. Make sure you never throw away anything that you love. Keep watching the squirrels.
The episode hasn't even really gotten that weird yet, but already the message is just strange and confusing. Screw money, screw doctors. You need to sit around and dream all the time? Does he mean literally dreaming like he should nap a lot? Or does he mean dreaming like coming up with cool new ideas for stuff? You'd assume it was the second one, but then he tells Jonathan to buy a car and never clean his room. What does that have to do with dreaming? Why are squirrels involved? Why is Mother Nature going around convincing children to buy air-polluting 1930s automobiles? Isn't that a net negative for her? Where's the Lorax when you need him? At least his shit rhymed. Instead of chalking all this up to an anxiety-induced fever dream brought on by the stress of his parents trying to make him the next Doogie Howser, Jonathan takes this strange advice to heart. We cut to years later, and Jonathan is now a teenager. And by teenager, we mean a 34-year-old post-Star Wars but pre-Joker Mark Hamill. And man, are they really pushing the suspension of disbelief trying to pass this dude off as 18 years old. He looks much closer to Yoda than young Luke Skywalker in 1984 is all I'm saying. Which makes this moment all the funnier.
Helmer, not in front of the child.
Not in front of the child? Lady, that guy is older than you are. But it's all okay because Jonathan Quick is no longer the lazy dreamer he was as a child. He completely ignored that dwarf guy. He's working 2 jobs at the local mill and a drugstore, patiently saving up his earnings for something big. What is it? Well, we don't know yet, but certainly it's his medical school tuition, right? After all, he spent his formative childhood years staring at photos of STDs and decaying skulls in that medical book. Surely that wasn't all just the pointless traumatizing of a child. So Jonathan tells his parents he has a surprise for them that he'll reveal tomorrow at lunch. And then Mark Hamill makes the first of many very strange acting decisions he's gonna make in this episode. And absolutely nobody on the set said, hey, that was great, but let's get one more where you aren't cosmically horrifying? The next day, his parents go outside to meet Jonathan for lunch, and he pulls up in a brand spanking new car. He's not spending the money he saved for the last several years on dumbass medical school. He's spending it on a sick-ass ride. Ma and Pa Quick are not feeling the vibe. But then again, if I wanted my son to go to medical school and instead he showed up driving a Cybertruck, I'd be pissed off too. But let me get this straight. When Jonathan was 7 years old, he saw a tiny man who told him to buy a car and never become a doctor. And not only did he remember this incident 10 years later and not assume it was some kind of dream he had, but also he actually literally listened to him? Okay, so now he's a full-time dreamer. So what does that mean? Is he gonna dream up the next great American novel? Invent jet-powered roller skates and get rich from the patent? Nah, apparently being a dreamer means quitting your job and polishing your new car all day. Just literally that and nothing else. That's not an exaggeration. There is a whole scene where Jonathan explains to his mom that all he wants to do all day is polish his car. And he says he's happy doing it, which is odd because polishing a car is work, just not the kind that makes you money. So he's not really dreaming, whatever that means. He's still spending his day working, but without any of the benefits other than having a shiny ass car, I guess? I mean, listen. I can get behind the idea that jobs are just a way of turning us all into zombified wage slaves, sacrificing 2/3 of our lives for nothing but the further enrichment of a handful of corporate fat cats who wouldn't give one single stale fart in either direction, whether we lived or died. But what is he expecting here? What's the end game of living with your parents and polishing your car all day? What's going to happen when he moves out on his own? It's at this point you've got to wonder if patterning your entire life after the advice you got from a homeless bearded elf guy was a wise choice. But instead of rethinking his life decisions, Hamill hits us with another strangely terrifying acting choice that makes you wonder if maybe he didn't even have to audition to be the voice of the Joker. Maybe they just watched this episode of Amazing Stories and sent him a contract.
Don't you care that you're killing your father?
He's killing himself.
Perhaps because of his laziness and unwillingness to find a job, or perhaps because he's scared that Mark Hamill will slit his throat in his sleep after that acting performance, Jonathan's father storms outside and kicks him out of the house. And then he launches into one of the most boomer speeches of all time, about laziness and lack of work ethic and how his son is a good-for-nothing slacker.
He was a no-good, lazy child, and now he's a no-good, lazy adult.
It's boomer perfection, a boomer work of art. Never before has anyone boomed so hard or boomed so loud, and this is where the themes of the episode start to take shape. Gather Ye Acorns was written, produced, and directed by members of the mid-80s Hollywood movie brats, a group of baby boomer filmmakers that popularized big summer blockbusters like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. This episode is a sharp rebuke of the hyper-capitalist, pull-yourself-up-by-your-bootstraps attitude of their generation. Boomers in the 80s were all about personal responsibility and working hard to make lots of money. It kind of defined that whole era. And this episode wants to say, look, man, not everything is about money. Sometimes you just need to chill out, hang back, and dream. Which isn't an entirely awful message, but, well, let's just continue on and find out how they chose to sell this message. I promise you will never in a million years be able to guess. So Jonathan packs up all of his belongings, all the toys and comic books he's refused to throw away over the years because one time a forest gnome told him not to, into his brand new car and drives away. But not before making me once again shit my pants in terror.
There's doctors aplenty in this world. What we truly need is a few more dreamers.
Cut to years later in 1955. Jonathan is broke, living in a shack in the middle of the desert. He's also 100% more bearded and creepy. One day he drives his now beat up and ragged car home to find two children waiting outside. And he just strolls up and starts telling them stories about the circus. Because it was 1955 and stranger danger hadn't been invented yet.
What a marvelous name. I was in love with a circus lady once named Elizabeth.
And let this be a lesson to you. The next time a bearded, creepy guy approaches your children and tells them that they remind him of a beautiful circus lady he fell in love with, stop and think about the fact that he's like this because a magical forest dwarf ruined his life with some of the worst advice anyone's ever given anybody. Now, you might think twice about how you treat him, but not this dad. No, he reacted kinda exactly the way you'd expect him to.
Hey! What are you doing with my kids?
He was telling us a story.
Well, forget the stories. They're a waste of time.
Wait a minute, so a strange bearded guy was creeping on your young children and that's what you have to say? Stories are a waste of time? This episode's anti-capitalist commentary is so heavy-handed that this character can't even protect his children from a potential abduction without hating on the arts. Come on, man. Make sure Elizabeth isn't traumatized before you crush the guy's dreams. But this isn't just any old anti-intellectual corporate stereotype. He works for a development company and he's coming out to tell Jonathan that they're going to bulldoze his shack and build a massive resort on the land. Jonathan is now homeless and there's nothing he can do about it because he doesn't own any of the land. He's a squatter because he has no money, because he listened to the little forest guy who told him to be a loser when he was a little kid for some reason. Surely this is all building up to something that makes sense, right? There's no way that this entire plot is just strange and confusing and goes in one of the weirdest possible directions you could think of, right? Well, Mother Nature's only son, or whatever he is, suddenly shows up again, and Mark Hamill is pissed. This dude ruined everything for him. He became a dreamer, he got the car, he kept all his junk, he didn't go to medical school, and now he's a creepy, bearded vagabond without a cent to his name. Why, little forest dude? Why?
You did not wish to work. You have not.
You said I'd be rich.
Rich is a relative term.
The millions of dollars were actually the friends we made along the way? It's one of those things? God damn it. Jonathan understandably loses his mind at this, having wasted half his life being broke and miserable based on this little guy's vague Tony Robbins self-help routine. He chases him around the house trying to kill him and cursing his name. MNOS tells Jonathan that he has his treasures, which is followed by this bizarre scene. What the hell am I even watching? Jonathan almost throws one of his treasures, a ceramic mug full of pennies given to him by his grandmother, but he can't bring himself to do it. This gift from his dear grandmama is too precious to him. It's too important. It has sentimental value. And isn't that what's important anyway? Not money, not success, but memories and people, right? And then MNOS hits him with the magic words that bring Jonathan back to reality.
That's your father talking, Gossoon.
I know.
I just honestly don't understand what the story is trying to say. Jonathan fears becoming his father more than anything, but like, why? Because his dad wanted him to go to medical school? Granted, he was a bit overzealous about pushing it on him as a young child, and maybe kicking him out of the house was a tad harsh, but was he really that bad? I'd be much more inclined to hate the dad if he had kicked Jonathan out of the house for normal behavior, like wanting to become an artist instead of a doctor or something. But by any metric, Jonathan objectively sucks. At the age of 18, he quit his job, spent his life savings on a car, and started living his life on vibes only, while expecting his parents to pay for it all. And is Jonathan's life really proving that his dad was wrong? Are we supposed to hate that guy and feel like Jonathan is on the right track? Or are we supposed to feel like Jonathan made the wrong choice and the more conservative and traditional parents were the ones in the right? But we don't have long to dwell on that because a bulldozer shows up and knocks down Jonathan's shack. And this is where we get the most heavy-handed visual symbolism of the entire episode. Jonathan's sitting, defeated, in his beat-up car as a bulldozer plows over his home in the background and the song Young at Heart plays. So, Jonathan's broke, homeless, and all he has is his car, his childhood belongings, and his dreams. And this is when we cut to present day, aka 1985. He's an old man. He still has his car and all of his childhood belongings, but they're all antiques at this point. He's been living as a homeless vagabond for decades. He pulls over at a gas station, but he doesn't have any money for the pump.
Get out of here, you bump. No.
And why does he want this tank of gas?
Take a fast drive off the edge of Hoover Dam.
He's gonna straight up pull a solo Thelma and Louise. But our dear, sweet, eternally suffering Jonathan is about to have a change of luck. Just as he's on the verge of an utter nervous breakdown, a white stretch limo pulls up beside him and a woman in the back rolls down her window.
I haven't been able to take my eyes off that exquisite mug of yours.
And what does he do with this priceless gift from his grandmama? The one that he couldn't bear to throw at the dwarf guy in the previous scene because of how precious it was? Well, he sells it for what he thinks is $10. And don't get me wrong, I totally understand why he sold it for $10. Dude's life is the worst. I'd sell it too at that point. But it just really begs the question, what is being said here? Are these gifts precious symbols of the truly important things in life that transcend the value of money or not? Well, either way, after agreeing to sell the mug to the woman, she clarifies that she's offering him $10,000, not 10. The mug is apparently a very valuable antique. I guess our boy Jonathan doesn't need to drive off the Hoover Dam after all. He has a reason to live because now he has money. Wait a minute. Wasn't the point of the story that money is? But here's the thing. It's not just the mug that's worth money. Every single one of Jonathan's childhood belongings, all the comics and toys, are insanely valuable antiques as well. He takes a bunch of them to a couple toy collectors, including a young Forrest Whitaker, to get appraised, and the guys are flabbergasted. Is it possible that maybe the little guy was onto something? That maybe he had a grand plan for Jonathan all along? The toy collectors offer $200,000 on the spot for a bunch of his toys and comics. And how does Jonathan react to the news that he's getting $200,000 Renos for his car full of junk? Well, with one of the most dead-eyed, nightmare-inducing, uncanny valley facial expressions and line deliveries ever made by a human being on camera.
You bet I am.
I mean, seriously, what the hell? I know it was the 1980s and maybe movie makeup wasn't as advanced as it is now, but why did they make his face look like that? You know, Like everything good about the world could be devoured by it, and you descend into a black void of sorrow where no hope could ever follow you by simply making eye contact with him. But no time to dwell on being swallowed by the black, uncaring oblivion hidden beneath that pallid layer of liquid latex, pancake makeup, and ego death. Jonathan has more junk, and he's taken it to the big leagues. The episode ends with Jonathan weeks later at a fancy auction, selling off his prized belongings for millions of dollars. And also, he's dripped the hell down. He's looking like John Hammond from Jurassic Park spared no expense at looking fine as hell. That's one silver fox. But he's not the only one. In the middle of the auction, he looks back and sees that little forest dwarf guy. But instead of looking the exact same as he has for the previous 30 years of appearances throughout Jonathan's life, now he's also a silver fox wearing a fancy suit. Jonathan approaches MNOS and offers to buy him a drink for all of his help, but then the dwarf disappears and the beautiful woman sitting next to him thinks that Jonathan was asking her on a date and accepts. Man, to top it all off, our sharp-suited silver fox also scores himself an upper crust honey at the end? What more can you ask for? Millions of dollars, some fine arm candy, and that sick beard? Mother Nature's only silver-bearded pimp sure seems satisfied with his work. And that's how the episode ends. Wasn't it so satisfying watching Jonathan patiently wait, sticking to his guns and remaining a dreamer, never getting a job, trusting in the advice of MNOS no matter how hard it was or how impossible it seemed, and for it all to pay off in the end? Not really. That's the lesson of the story? Spend your entire life broke, homeless, and miserable, and then one day when you're 95% dead, you might happen to own a bunch of valuable antiques and become massively wealthy 5 years before you keel over? I mean, honestly, this is all great news for the young lady he left with at the end. She struck gold there, but for Jonathan? What is the message of Gather Ye Acorns? It's one of the most baffling stories I've ever seen. They spend the entire duration of the episode rebuking capitalistic greed, fiscal conservatism, worship of the almighty dollar, and the traditional work yourself into the grave mentality of the baby boomer generation, only to wrap the episode up by saying, actually, never mind. Getting lots of money is the key to happiness. Here's hoping you have an insanely valuable comic book in your trunk. What were you trying to say, Spielberg? Was obsessing over the rat race of modern life and the accumulation of wealth in the 1980s what killed our collective soul? Or are you just a huge advocate for being a pack rat? What rat-themed lesson were you aiming for here? I don't get it. The episode presents itself as an uplifting success story with a surprise twist ending that makes everything all worth it. But I just see a dude who was miserable for his entire life so he could be rich for a couple years at the end of it. And that just seems incredibly depressing to me. That was a better alternative to becoming a doctor? Really? Oh, I figured it out. Spielberg hates doctors. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is kind of a weird experimental one. I just, I've had this episode of this show in my head for years. Like I said it in the video, I watched it back in 2015. And I just thought it was just the weirdest episode of a TV show I'd ever seen. And periodically I think about it and it just kind of knocks around in my brain. And then I finally was just like, I want to sit down and just write about my perspective on this strange episode and see if anybody else gets a kick out of this. And so I had the idea for making this video. I'm going to make more kind of like long form storytelling videos like the David Hahn video, in the future. But I also want to do weird little niche stuff like this. And I kind of want this channel to just be anything that I want it to be. And I really hope that you guys start to like follow me on that ride as I make more and more videos, which by the way, I'm going to be back to posting regular long form videos. So watch out for those. I have a lot of cool things in store. I'm working on a long form video that's the history of Newgrounds.com. And I actually got interviews with a couple people that were active on Newgrounds back in the early 2000s, like Aaron Hansen, aka Ego Raptor, and David Firth, the guy who created Salad Fingers. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for more.